First story. Entitled in-laws and Sills neglected their dying grandma, left me to leave my job and take care of her, while Mill made her life more miserable by arguing and smoking in front of her. Now Mill demands I cook for them and my Sills family for Thanksgiving to respect grandma's last wish to celebrate one last Thanksgiving at her house while taking care of her. Me 43F and my husband 43M aren't seeing eye to eye on Thanksgiving this year. Here is the long and somewhat complicated backstory. My husband's grandmother 84F is dying. She raised him, so she is more of his mother than my Jan Mill will ever be. As in, if she makes it to the holidays, these will more likely than not be her last. She was recently in the hospital in severely bad condition. She has COPD and is very frail. Her oxygen levels wouldn't stay up. Hence she got a week-long stay in the hospital. She is bedridden and cannot care for herself or even sit up unassisted. She was admitted on Monday, and we were not told until Wednesday, when his sister called us. My husband's mom had told them that we already knew when we didn't. I immediately took time off work and stayed with her 24 hours a day from Wednesday to Monday, only leaving once for a couple hours to get cleaned up and get her the bag of Fritos she wanted. My husband was there from Thursday evening to Sunday midday with us. Other than that, my two sisters-in-law visited for a few hours total, and my Jan Mill was there for a total of 1.5–2 hours total during that time. Grandma begged her daughter to stay and visit a while with her, and my Jan Mill refused, saying she had to get home and do housework repeatedly. Yet she would go into histrionics if Grandma took a dip in a negative direction. Grandma was discharged home to die and refused hospice. Grandma lives with Jan Mill and Step Phil. Grandma is on oxygen, and both in-laws are not in good health either. Jan Mill will smoke in the house with Grandma there. Jan Mill swears she is the only caretaker Grandma needs. To add to the chaos, the hospital Grandma was in was the one my father died in. Staying in the hospital is what I did with him for a large part of my early to mid-30s as his caregiver. At one point, her room was 2 doors down from the exact room my dad died in. I was alone in caring for my dad, and when he died, I was by myself. I developed PTSD from it. So this whole experience has been a massive trigger for me, and my in-laws have zero appreciation for what I did for their grandma or mother. My husband first asked if we could do Thanksgiving dinner with his grandma, Jan Mill, and Phil at their house, since his grandma's time is short. I was reluctant but agreed. Somehow, his sisters found out and invited themselves to it as well. We were informed of this by Jan Mill. When together, it will total 15 people. They get loud and will even argue with each other. Jan Mill also smokes in the house, which I cannot stand the smell of. My husband and I work retail and make the least out of his siblings. I lost pay by taking time to sit in the hospital, which none of them did. We are now expected to feed up to 15 people with no help from anyone else. If Grandma dies before Thanksgiving, then they are going to cancel the entire dinner. My husband doesn't think it's going to be that expensive, but they expect the turkey, 8–10 sides, desserts, and rolls. All homemade. I want to cry thinking of all the work. My husband thinks it's not that much work. I told him we needed to start buying and preparing now for all that. He disagreed and said we can buy a few days before, but it shouldn't take more than a few hours the day before to make everything. I am stressed to my limit. I am getting migraines now, almost daily, and I can't get in touch with my therapist until December. I have tried to talk him into canceling, or even getting them to chip in, and he has refused. I get why he wants to do this, but it just feels like it's being dumped on my shoulders to deal with alone. I don't want to tell him no, but I seriously just want a break from people altogether on the holiday, after spending unending hours at work, with literally screaming children, horribly entitled customers, and all the stress of everything else. Would I be the arsehole if I just didn't go to dinner, even if it upsets him? Update. Thank you to everyone who commented. I was feeling so guilty for feeling like I was, but you all helped me feel so much better about it. So some things have happened since my original post, but first I would like to answer some questions. 1. Grandma is bedridden and lives with my Jan Mill and Phil. There is no way to bring her to our place to have Thanksgiving here, hence why we have to go there. 2. Those who commented about the smoking and oxygen. Yeah, totally agree. Jan Mill is not that bright obviously, and doesn't see that she is creating a worse situation. It's also why I worry about the care Grandma is getting with Jan Mill as her sole caregiver. 3. The cooking. While DH has cooked Thanksgiving dinner before, it has only been for a maximum of 3 people, and it was a very limited menu of potatoes, stuffing, and turkey. However, he offered to cook a full meal at home to make this last holiday with Grandma extra meaningful. 4 in-laws. Yes, they invited themselves. While I don't hate them, I am given a headache at the idea that inviting oneself is an okay thing to do. On to the update. I actually have IBS, and all the stress actually caused a very severe flare-up at work last night. It was the worst I have ever experienced. I was passing blood and experiencing digestive distress, cramping, dizziness, etc. I contacted my husband, who asked if I couldn't leave because it was so bad. That's when I told him I had used up all my leave on his grandma's hospital stay, and we could not afford for me to miss any more time anyway. He didn't reply for a full 3 minutes. I think that's when it hit him. The stress of everything was going to put me in the hospital, and I literally, physically, and mentally could not take it anymore. My boss was great about letting me sit in the break room and recover a bit on the clock while checking in with a telehealth doctor on what to do for my flare. After an hour or so, I was able to work again, but at a slower pace. I powered through work, how I don't know, and got home later. When I came through the door, my husband got up from bed and panicked when he saw me. He said my face was pale, and I had almost no color on my lips. He got me to bed, made me hot tea and some stomach medicine, and asked what he could do to help. That's when the floodgates opened, and I began to cry. I told him my stress has to come down, that after everything, plus work, adding on a Thanksgiving dinner that big, from scratch, for that many people was way too much. I couldn't do it. I told him while I was getting it. I get why he wants to do it. I get that it may be grandma's last, but the stress of it was just way more than I and my body could handle. He immediately looked so guilty. He wrapped his arms around me and apologized profusely. He said he was so focused on the time he had left with his grandma and making her happy that he hadn't realized just what he was putting on me. He said my health was more important than his siblings getting a free meal. He then asked if I would be okay just cooking for us, his grandma, mom, and stepdad. I said yes, but then I asked if we could not make everything from scratch, and he instantly agreed. So we are going to decide tonight what is getting store-bought and what can just be taken off the menu. He is also calling his sisters and telling them that it's not possible for them to come and to make other arrangements. He has also agreed to help prep things ahead as well. We are going to use disposable pans and plates for most things to make cleanup easier as well. So today is my day off, and I am in bed resting, now on an anti-inflammatory diet, and trying to distress as much as I can. My husband said he would be cooking dinner for tonight and tomorrow, and for me to just take it easy. He has called from work to check on me several times. He said that regardless of the cost, if my flare doesn't calm down, I should just go to the hospital and get taken care of. This is probably the best I could hope for at the moment. When we talk tonight, I am going to ask for a no-smoking ban while I am at their house and plan to take some kind of odor neutralizer with me to help with the smell of it. If they don't agree, then we will cook at our home, and he can deliver them plates of food instead of us cooking there. Update. Well, more stuff has happened to cause changes to the plans. My husband went to his grandmother's house yesterday, and his niece and nephew were there as well. It was also his deceased grandpa's birthday, which is why grandma asked him to come visit. This part is secondhand, as I heard it from DH. While he was visiting grandma, she wanted her Christmas tree to be worked on and the ornaments rearranged. Grandma asked her niece and nephew to go into the kitchen with Jay and Mill, so she and DH could have some quality alone time. She apparently wanted to talk to DH about something private while they worked on the tree. Well, trust Jay and Mill to be the drama queen. She started having a fit that niece and nephew were asked to go into the kitchen with her and made a big tantrum of having to call Sylville to come get them because it was so much trouble they were causing. As Phil came out of his room, having been woken up from a nap by all the noise. What ensued was a fight with cussing and swearing between Jay and Mill and Phil and at Grandma when she would try to get them to stop. It got to the point where Phil started threatening to put the house back in Grandma's name and then to move out and take all financial support with him. Grandma then tells DH that he often threatens her with that. The argument continued until Phil said that he had had enough and wasn't letting Thanksgiving dinner be cooked at his house. When told that that wasn't possible, he said it was, and that he would refuse to open the door for DH. At this point, Jan Mill and Grandma became upset. Jan Mill told him he could because she had been looking forward to it. As Phil said, just watch him. He would do it in a heartbeat. Grandma just sadly looked at my husband and quietly asked, "Are you not cooking dinner anymore?" When my husband told me what happened, I fell out of my chair in elation. I knew something like this was going to happen. I just saw how I knew it. So I said that it was fine. We could cook at our house for ourselves, and then fix up several plates with dessert, and the meal just for Grandma since she is the innocent one in all this, and take it to her a bit later in the day. He agreed to it, and I have felt much more at ease ever since. So a smaller dinner and smaller sides to cook. A smaller bill, less time in a smoke-filled house, and less stress, and Grandma still gets her dinner and dessert. I call it a win-win. I also told Hubs that if he threatens that again, we can say fine, go ahead and do it. We will have Grandma then put the house into a trust, where the only ones to benefit from it would be me, my husband, and Grandma. Then, after Grandma passed, they would get booted. We would fix, deodorize, and paint the house, and we would either live there while we worked toward rebuilding our home or rent it out for additional income, without having to worry about inheritance taxes and whatnot. Again, a win-win. Grandma won't move out of that house, as it's the home she and her husband struggled for and rebuilt from bare brick walls. It's her comfort place, so she won't leave even with the fights, threats, and Jan Mill smoking in the house while she is on oxygen. We can't afford to financially support 2 houses at the moment, and moving would be impossible for us at this time. The husband called his sister right away and told her the truth about what happened so his niece and nephew wouldn't get punished. Even with this turn of events, I have a feeling this is not over in any way. However, after being on a light, anti-inflammatory diet for a few days and having an emergency appointment with my therapist, I am feeling a lot better. Talking to my son 16, at a special private school in another city, and daughter almost 19, and finally being able to give them some love and attention they needed helped a lot as well. Thank you, everyone, for your suggestions and well wishes. My husband is being tremendously supportive, and it finally feels like we are dealing with this together. Hopefully, this continues. I will try to update if anything else changes after Thanksgiving. Whichever is first. Update. I didn't think I would be updating this until after Thanksgiving, but here I am. So Sunday morning, Jan Mill called at 8:30 in the morning and kept calling about every 20 minutes until about noon. Why? Phil somehow managed to take the railing from Grandma's hospital, and they couldn't get it back on. He also managed to hurt his wrist in the process. Enter eye roll here. They wanted DH to come over ASAP to fix it. The next phone call was to tell us that Grandma was being taken back to the hospital. DH had put the call on speaker, and I started asking why Grandma was going back to the hospital when she hadn't even been home for 3 weeks yet. Jane Mill said she had the start of a sore or something on her back and her hip. I asked if Jan Mill had been turning her, and Sville started yelling and cussing at me over the phone from the background. Jan Mill then hung up. 5 minutes later, she called back, and Sville was still yelling and cussing me out in the background. The first thing I did was tell them both that I would not tolerate being yelled at and talked to like that in any instance, and that it could be knocked off right then and there. Second, there was zero reason to attack anyone asking questions to get a clear understanding of what was going on, and it was the height of ignorance to treat anyone in that manner, and I would not allow the phone call to continue unless they behaved accordingly. He immediately shut up. Jan Mill then proceeded to tell us how hard it was, how she mentally and physically could not do it on her own, and that she needed help. We texted Sills, alerting them to the change in Grandma's status and telling them what happened. They asked if we were still cooking at Grandma's, and we told them no. We would be taking Grandma a plate later on if she was home, but Jan Mill and Sville were on their own. If Grandma was still in the hospital, then obviously we wouldn't do anything without doctors, okay? Sills agreed with it. After all that, and while waiting for word from Grandma, DH asked if we couldn't pack more food to give some to his mother. I just looked at him, and he didn't argue or say anything after that. About 4 hours later, we got notified that Grandma was back home, and it looked like she had bruises on her back and hips. The paramedics kindly fixed her bed, and my husband informed me that he was totally worn out from everything and couldn't handle seeing them before Thanksgiving Day. I told him if that was what he wanted, it was fine with me, and we could always make the visit for a few hours only so he didn't get stressed. He agreed and went to lay down. He slept the rest of the day and night. This is the most stressful Thanksgiving ever, and it has nothing to do with the food at this point. After Grandma is gone, I am going to approach going to NC with Jan Mill and Sville, as they are such a stressor for me and my husband. Update. Before I get to the update, I would like to address one thing that a lot of people have said that is absolutely not true. Grandma is not abused. She bruises easily. She always has. She is like a very ripe banana. You look or breathe wrong, and she gets a bruise. There is zero need for APS intervention, and anytime a new bruise or sore appears, she is transported by ambulance to the hospital for evaluation. Here, medical staff are mandatory reporters. If they suspect abuse, They are required by law to call the police or provide protective services. They saw no need to do this. Please stop saying she is abused. Also, Grandma is lucid. She knows what's going on and has chosen to live in this environment, as that house was the one she and her husband fought for and rebuilt from the ground up. Moving her isn't going to happen. On to the update. DH and I got up early and started cooking. I did the pie, and on a few sides, he handled the turkey and the rest of the sides. We portioned up enough for Grandma and a bit more in case she wanted seconds, as it was done into aluminum to-go containers. In total, it would be about a plate and a half of food. We kept it all in a thermal bag to help it stay hot. As the last of the food was being done, Hubs went and got cleaned up while I finished up the cooking. He put everything away and tidied up the stove while I got ready. After that, we packed up everything we needed into a cart and started the 1.5-mile walk to Grandma's around 3:45. It wasn't bad of a walk, and when I got there, the first thing I did was unpack the candle and candle warmer and get that going because the smell of cigarette smoke was strong, and it smelled a bit like new and old cigarette smoke mixed together. I went in and said hi to Grandma as DH dished her up the food and brought it in to her. He sat down to talk to her as she ate. Where I sat, I had a direct line of sight to the bag we had packed the food into. DH forgot to pack it back up into the bag when he was done making Grandma's plate. I caught Phil eyeing the containers of food and just knew he was going to try to take some. I got up from my chair and said to my husband as I walked into the kitchen, DH, you forgot to put the food back in the bag to keep warm. Right in front of Phil, I packed everything back up and zipped the bag closed, making it clear it was not to be touched. After about an hour, Phil began grumbling about how he was hungry. He looked at Jan Mill and asked, how about cooking me some food? To which he was told no. Her arms were hurting her, and she wasn't cooking. Next, Phil called both my sills, and I about fell out of my chair laughing. He told them both to bring him some food, and they both said no. One was working, and the other had just had surgery on her elbow the day before, and she made it clear she was not cooking because of that. Well, he grumbled about being hungry and wanting some food. Jean Mill told him to cook for himself if he was hungry. Grandma looked better than when I last saw her. She ate almost her entire plate of food as well. She did have her oxygen off a lot, but when her breathing became too difficult, she would put it back on. So that was a plus. We spent about 4 hours there with her, and while Phil did get loud a few times, he would look at me and shut up really quickly. I had that, don't try anything with me today look. After a couple of hours, he ended up going down the hall and shutting himself in his room. After that, if he wanted anything, he would call Jan Mill on the phone. We did end up offering Jan Mill some of what was left, but she didn't want any. At the end, we trekked back home and arrived around 8:30 p.m. exhausted. We heated up some of the food first we had since about 9:30 to 10 a.m. and then fell asleep in bed until the next morning. Not very exciting, I know. Hubby has agreed that we are not doing this again. So from now on, holidays will be easier for us and me. My health is slowly improving. I have several therapy appointments scheduled, and that's the best I can ask for now. Thanks for following this saga and the support. It has meant a lot. I am not sure I would have kept my sanity if it hadn't been for everyone who commented. Thank you. Update. So for anyone who read about my husband's grandmother and the Thanksgiving dinner debacle, this is the last post regarding my in-laws and will be my husband's grandmother. Anyone who doesn't know is welcome to search back for all the posts about me getting volunteered without permission to cook Thanksgiving dinner for my husband's entire family pretty much at the last minute, and my husband being clueless. Grandma's health was stable for a while, but was showing dementia strongly by Christmas. At the end of January, there were more times than not when she wasn't living in reality, just in her mind. In the beginning of February, she was admitted to the hospital. Hubby used up a week of vacation to spend my birthday with me and to work on the house. The day after my birthday, I had to go to work, and my husband stayed at home to clean and cook dinner for when I got home. Well, the hospital called my mill, saying Grandma was entering active death. My mill called my sisters who drive, and none of them were willing to go to the hospital. They called my husband and told him to go. Sil 1 was working, and Sil 2 was in a hospital 25 minutes away with her own daughter. Mill couldn't leave as she doesn't drive. She lives a 1-minute walk from public transit, and she had to take care of her husband, who is perfectly capable of caring for himself for a few hours. DH met me after work, and since we don't drive, we got on the public transit to get to the hospital. We arrived several hours after the hospital first called. We walked into the ward and talked to her nurse, who informed us it was an active death, and she wouldn't last more than an hour or two. We entered the room, and she did look like a corpse in the bed. I messaged my sister, and my husband messaged his mom to get their backsides to the hospital now. His mom messaged him back and said to call her, and to put her mom on the phone, asking what grandma was saying. She wasn't saying anything. She was busy dying and totally non-responsive. We told her that, and she kept insisting that we call and put grandma on the phone. Then my sills call me on group video chat, demanding to talk to their grandma over video. This exchange goes on, with us telling them she can't talk or even reply, but they keep insisting. Finally, Hubs snapped a quick picture to send to Mill, and I flipped the camera around and showed Sills their grandma, then flipped it back and told them to get their butts there now if they wanted to say goodbye, or they would be too late. They both finally got that she was truly dying and started crying, hung up, and started to finally head to the hospital. My husband and I sat with her, holding her hand, saying our goodbyes while waiting for them to show up. She took her last breath just before they showed up on the hospital floor. This hospital is laid out similar to a capital H and a capital E, with the long parts touching. The elevators would be on the short crossbar of the H, and Grandma's room was at the end of the bottom corner of the capital E. You heard nothing until they turned onto the corridor leading to her room. In the room, with the door half closed, we suddenly heard loud wailing and, "Mommy, my mommy." I leaned back and looked out the doorway, and behold, here comes my Mill and both Sill crying and carrying on so loudly. Patients are coming to their doors and looking out to see what is going on. I leaned forward, eyes wide, and looked at my husband, and he gave me the, "Are you freaking kidding me right now" look. We moved away from his now passing grandma as they entered the room. It took them about 2-3 minutes to stop the show and be quiet. I stepped out of the hall, trying to give them a chance to privately say goodbye. As I was standing outside, the doctor approached, offered his condolences, and went into the room and introduced himself. He then proceeded to pronounce the time of death, and they looked at him like deer in headlights and went, "You mean she's dead? She died?" I went and asked the nurse to please shut the monitors off, because the alarms were sounding. As I talked to the nurse, you could hear the wailing start again. I went back in with the nurse, and not even 4 minutes after the monitors were off, they were hightailing it out of there. I asked my Mill if she would like for me to notify the funeral home to come get Grandma, and I got my head taken off. They came in 2 cars, and all of them left and left us there with his grandma. As we were trying to figure out a ride home, his sister texted him, saying they were all going to his grandma's home if we wanted to come join them. This was in addition to us notifying the rest of her family, except her son or husband's uncle, that she had passed away because Mill and Sills couldn't be bothered with that. Mill said she tried calling her brother, but he refused to answer. The next night we were at home taking bereavement time, and I was recovering from the PTSD trigger, as Grandma died in the same hospital my dad died in, when Mill calls and tells us how she and both Sills went to view Grandma's body that morning before it was sent to the crematorium. She goes on to describe it in detail to my husband, who took care of his grandma for 26 years, lived with her for over 38 years, and wasn't even invited. Fast forward to 3 days later, and they want us over to Grandma's now Mill and Esville house to have a family dinner. We aren't even there for 30 minutes before his sisters start talking about having to leave soon. After they leave, I am talking to Mill and Esville about how they will have to probate her estate and such, and they decided to tell me they aren't and don't have to, because there is no law saying you have to. There actually is, and if they don't, they could be in big trouble. I give up trying, and we go home. A week goes by, and we realize nobody got a hold of our husband's uncle. Husband's uncle changes his number every 3 to 6 months, because he swears everyone gives it out, and then starts to crank call him, etc. Uncle is a habitual liar who never visited his sick and dying mother, even after multiple promises, and only lived 25 minutes away. We do, however, know his address. So I wrote him a letter, a bit cold in the facts and stating why the letter was necessary, left it unsigned, and informed him of his mom's passing. We mail it out without a return address, as the husband is done with the man, and is cutting him off after this final thing. Fast forward 5 days. Husband is now at home sick as a dog, and his phone rings. It's his uncle calling. His uncle doesn't even say hello. He just starts yelling at my husband that he should have called him, etc. The husband tells him we didn't have his number. He didn't write the letter. I wrote it. Lol, and then hung up and blocked his uncle. He informed Mill she might get an angry phone call, and it has been blessed crickets ever since. I wish it had a happier ending. The only question I have is if hubby and I were jerks when it came to his uncle. I know it wasn't the best way to have him informed. but it beat having an attorney or police tell him, or just never telling him at all. All of which were options we discussed beforehand. Second story. My husband of 14 years refused to give me another chance, even after I confessed to cheating the very next day. Then I made a move, thinking he would reconcile, but instead, I saw him crying, having a breakdown. Now he has sent me divorce papers and is taking my daughters. I'm regretting everything now. This is long, but it's something I needed to get off of my chest. My husband 36M and I 36F have been together for 16 years and married for 14 years. We have 2 daughters who are 13 and 12. About 3 months ago, I cheated on him with my coworker once and immediately regretted it. To be honest, I still haven't figured out the real reason why I cheated. On the surface level, the reason would be that my husband was too caught up with work for a couple of months, and I felt neglected and unappreciated at times. I know that isn't the real reason, so I'm trying to figure out what it is through individual counseling. I only cheated on him that one time and immediately told him the next day because I couldn't bottle up my guilt and shame. He was shocked at first, but then went on to call me the most horrid names. I deserved it. I deserved a lot more than that. I don't even know how it got to the point of me sleeping with my coworker. It started with innocent flirting, and before I knew it, I had made the worst mistake of my life by sleeping with him. I wish I'd gotten hit by a car that day before sleeping with him. I cut off all contact with my coworker and gave up my phone to my husband. I wanted to reassure him that I was willing to make this work on his terms, whatever they were, as long as he would give me another chance. Even though in my heart I knew that I wanted another chance to prove myself, I told him that I would understand if he went through with a divorce. Anyway, I told my husband that I would do anything to regain his trust and expressed my sorrow and regret for having hurt him so much. My husband has always been the type of guy who gives a person only one chance. Even in his friendships, if the trust had been broken, he wouldn't give the other person another chance. He said that he wanted a divorce, but then the whole quarantine thing happened, and he stayed in the house for about 2 months and didn't proceed with the divorce. For the first month, he treated me very coldly, and the only time we talked was when it had to do with our daughters. I slept on the couch and tried to give him as much space as he needed, and I only reminded him from time to time that if he ever wanted to work things out, I'd be more than willing to, and would be completely devoted to the process of him working things out. He even said some spiteful things during that month and distanced himself from me completely. During the second month, there was a change, as he began talking to me again. We talked about daily stuff, and even watched movies together with the girls as a family. I felt like he wanted to try reconciling, and I was so happy. I was thrilled that there might be a chance to save my family and us. Eventually, through the next couple of days, I could sense us becoming friends all over again. He even invited me to sleep on the bed again. It was really working out, and I reminded him that he could talk about anything he wanted with me. A couple of weeks passed, and we were getting along even better. We were spending time as a family again, and had gotten closer to each other as well. I felt really good about the way things were going, but I wish I'd suggested marriage counseling. I just didn't want to pressure him and have him think that I wanted to sweep this situation under the rug, or that I was trying to influence him to not divorce me. One night we were drinking a bit, just talking in our bedroom, and I felt a genuine connection rebuilding. It felt like we were falling for each other all over again, and it made me so happy. This is the part I regret now. I decided to make a move on him and straddled him while we were laughing at a joke. We looked each other in the eyes, and so naturally I began making out with him. It honestly felt like we were 20 all over again. He kissed me back as well, but after a while, he just started crying. He told me to stop and said that he couldn't. I felt so awful because I felt like he wanted to, but didn't at the same time. It broke my heart to see just how badly my stupid decision had hurt him. I told him that I was sorry, and we went to sleep. The reason I say I regret doing this is because I feel like this moment pushed him away forever. 2 days later, he informed me that he wanted to go through with a divorce. He said that he just doesn't think he could make it work, even after trying for the last 2 months. I wanted to fight with him about it, but I just told him that I understood. We had already decided before that if a divorce was to happen, it would be on fair terms. Sure, we'd both have lawyers, but we agreed on a lot of stuff together. He wanted to take a 2-week trip, but would come back to pick up the girls after his trip. We both mutually agreed that we'd split the time with the girls after his trip. They would spend half of the week with him and the other half with me. I even helped him pack up his stuff, and when we finished, I just balled it out and we hugged it out. After his 2-week trip, he came back, and it felt good to see him again. But I knew it wasn't the same. He just smiled, and we made small talk before he took the girls. We're both really good parents, and we want the best for our kids. Today, I got served divorce papers. It hurts so much to know that I lost my best friend because I was stupid. Sometimes I roll over to his side of the bed in the morning, and I hate how I don't feel his body there anymore. I miss his smell, his smile, and his voice. I miss him filling up the entire room with his loud, adorable laugh. I miss him so much. The thing that hurts me the most in all of this is knowing how badly I hurt the person I love the most. I wish I could go back in time and undo what I did, but I can't. So now here I am writing about it on Reddit, while crying when there's nothing that I can do about it. I wish I could let him see for himself what I genuinely feel in my heart about how sorry I am, and about how I would be the most devoted wife ever if he just gave me another chance to let him know just how much I love him, and that I'd literally do anything for him. I messed up the most perfect thing that ever happened to me. I wish I could get him back, but I know that I lost him forever. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button,